Last February, I, as perhaps many of you, was reminded by the commercial offers and annoying internet ad about the celebration of St. Valentine's Day, a holiday to remember an ancient history and honor one of the greatest feelings on earth. Or perhaps the greatest one, since there is no, for instance, an International Day of Hatred, or no, an Anxiety Day, or not even a Universal Day of Kindness. Because probably we don't want to commemorate negative feelings nor intermediate ones. Love is a very strong and comprehensible emotion. But discourse aside, what I want to talk about is how love is depicted in visual art. My initial plan was to make a video wherein I would give you some tips on how to spend perfect St. Valentine's Day with your chosen one in a local art museum. But my inner self was so against of the idea to take an advantage of this, because we all know that there shouldn't be any particular time nor space to think or to remember about love. Although some artists would disagree with me. For instance, famous artist Robert Indiana and his Love installation. 4 famous letters were even translated into several languages and placed in several metropolises. What is believed being a pop art artwork objectifies the very intangibility of love. Much as it is strange, but love becomes the sight and the object, accessible in the public domain, to remind us on a daily basis about the feeling that conquered the world. But is it actually as simple as Indiana's artwork? Sure, we sometimes feel like Marc Chagall's Over the Town, a painting depicting himself and his beloved wife Bella lifted from the ground, holding each other tight as to express the greatness of their love and happiness as nobody in the world could possibly experience. We do as well understand why Gustav Klimt covers his painting with gold, akin icons in the Byzantine churches, hereby declaring that love and its manifestation is sacral. Countless amount of artworks was dedicated to love, decorated with chubby cupids or happy lovers. Almost every art museum has a painting or sculpture about or around love. It is of course true to say that love is a very happy, glorious and sublime feeling, but at the same time there is some art to prove the opposite. You have probably heard of Edvard Munch, and maybe even saw his painting, The Scream of Nature. By the way, some art historians believe that Scream was an artist's self-reflection on his tragic life. Edvard Munch was born in 1863 in a farmhouse in the Kingdom of Sweden and Norway. When he was just 5 years old, he lost his mother, who died of tuberculosis. In 9 years, because of the same disease, his beloved sister has passed away. Around Edvard's 26th birthday, his father dies and leaves his family in a very complicated situation. On top of that, one of his youngest sisters was diagnosed mentally ill. During his lifetime, he has never been married, nor has been in any long-term relationship historians would be aware of. However, we can assume that he experienced love just by seeing this painting. It is called Kiss by the Window and pictures 2 formless figures bound into each other in the cold embrace. Munch puts the couple in the corner of the canvas and by doing it reduces the distance between them and creates secrecy so typical for amateur lovers. Due to this composition and dark hues of the blue, one may interpret it as a sexual uncertainty or a phobia of being close to anyone. We cannot be certain about the artist, but at the same time we cannot deny a coexistence of these sexual problems and love in one. Another prominent artist of the 20th century, Edvard Hopper, studies his own relationship and thus relationships between 2 human beings further. Admittedly, he's the one who managed to capture solitude in his paintings. You can feel it even in his artwork called Excursion into Philosophy, where he depicts 2 people, a man sitting on the bed and a woman lying half naked next to him. There is no distance between them that would be otherwise signified by the ray of light between the 2. Yet the detachment is obvious to the viewer because of the non-verbal communication. She turned around as if she was tired or offended. He is staring at the void in front of him, resting his arms on his thighs, maybe also tired or maybe puzzled with the discoveries from the philosophical book he just put aside. And is it a philosophy at all that made him so concentrated, or has it anything to do with the woman on his bed? What does make him so perplexed? The ideas of the greatest minds, or possible coincidence that those great minds could feel the same we do from time to time? From the school bench, we've been told that love is a tragedy, thanks to Romeo and Juliet, Anna Karenina, and a number of other literary characters. But perhaps the biggest anthology of heartbreaking stories is collected in ancient myth and novels. And the list of masterpieces that illustrate them is just endless. Just look at it. Perfect, flawless bodies, shining skin and echoing textiles. With all the respect to the old masters, I'd rather say it is not about tragic love at all. It is primarily about the artist him or herself and his or her artistic abilities. Well done then, but there is, however, another example of myth depiction. This is a triptych by famous modernist Cy Twombly that is called Hero and Leandro. If you're familiar with the Greek mythology, you might have heard of Hero and Leander who, despite the strait waters that separated them, were seeing each other constantly. Hero would ignite the light every night on the top of her tower, and Leander then would swim across the strait, guided by her light, just to spend some time with her. One night, the light of Hero was suddenly blown out, and before Hero noticed that and lighted it up again, Leander died without her flames, without knowing where to go. What a beautiful metaphor. Next morning, Hero found his body washed ashore. She couldn't find any strength to get over his death, so she threw herself off the tower and joined his lover in the afterlife. As it is typical for abstract expressionism, there is no figurative representation of the characters, because Twombly is aiming to express feelings and sensations that would accompany this story, not the story itself. Knowing it, you can try to guess whether it's actually their love painted as rough scratches, or maybe it is the waves and sea foam mixed with Leander's blood in front of the feet of heartbroken Hero. It is an extraordinary example of how a legendary love story is depicted rather intimate and touching. The only one thing that makes it epic again is the scale of the work. Each canvas is about 2 meters high and 2.5 meters wide. Cy Twombly does not merge them into one, though instead he divides them into 3 main parts, or one may say breaks it down in shots. By following this sequence, viewers can experience the dynamics of the artwork, almost like watching a movie with no happy ending. Unconditional love, sacrifice and reciprocity between Hero and Leander make us come back to their story again and again, even in modern time. But in return, modern time brings us a new environment for love. Let me show you an example. In 1991, Felix Gonzalez-Torres synchronized 2 identical clocks and put them next to each other on the wall. This artwork is basically an embodiment of the letter Felix wrote to his lover Ross Laycock in 1988. Don't be afraid of the clocks. They are our time. Time has been so generous to us. We imprinted time with the sweet taste of victory. We conquered fate by meeting at a certain time in a certain space. We are the product of time, therefore we give back credit there its due. Time. We are synchronized now and forever. I love you. The artwork dates 1991, the year when Ross died of AIDS. Felix himself died 5 years later. Facing the death, one reflects on time spent and time left with the dearest people. Spectators often think of Perfect Lovers as a romantic allegory. Well, of course, it was the main idea. However, surprising interpretation can be hidden in the maintenance of the artwork. The thing is that mechanical clocks can eventually fall out of the synchronization, the fact that Felix was well aware of. As his recommendation to the museums in exhibiting this artwork, he set up some rules, according to which the time can be reset if necessary. Nevertheless, even the idea of 2 mechanisms falling out of the synchronization makes us think of inevitable malsynchronization of two loving hearts. And when it happens, what can art tell us about it? We've seen separation because of the tragic events leading to death. But what if love dies? And here I just have to recall one of the greatest breakups in the world. In 1988, Marina Abramović and her life and art partner Ule did a performance called The Lovers, the Great Wall Walk. After 12 years of working and living together, they decided to finish their relationship and document it as an artwork.
He started in Gobi Desert, I started in Yellow Sea, and each we walk 2,500 kilometers to say goodbye.
Again, we should not think of the artwork from a one-way perspective. It is not just about the end of the relationship, although the moment they meet each other on the wall is quite sad. The video through which we now can see this performance is not just about their final point. We shall not forget about 90 days they spent on the way to each other, meditating on life, time, culture, and universe. As for me, it became an expression of this process when you give yourself some time to think of your relationship and then come to an end without any changes in your mind. Seeing now Marina and Ule as two very successful artists, we can be skeptical and cynical about their message. But if you look at it without presentism or simply saying, if you imagine the whole artwork without any context, you may find it not just sad, but on the contrary, uplifting and full of hope. Because sometimes devastation gives room to something new. In terms of love, art can show us all the imperfection of real world and real feelings. It reminds us that love goes hand in hand with the tragedy, grief, fear of first approach, and fear of irreversible loss, death, and misunderstanding. Though lines of canonical symbol of love are so simple to draw, and thereby to pass it as some sort of message, we shall not underestimate the complexity and fragility of this feeling. And thanks to all the artists that throughout history do not give up in search of new dimensions, new means of expressions, and new meanings of love. And of course, thank you for your attention, and I hope I'll see you next time somewhere where the art is.